All right, welcome everyone. Going to give folks a few moments to join and then we'll go ahead and get started here. It looks like we're starting to get a good amount of folks hopping in. So I'll start off with a quick intro. Welcome everyone to Go-to-Market Strategies for Launching Building Envelope Products. Really excited to be bringing this webinar to you guys today. We're going to start off with a presentation from Steve Gaynor. Steve is the owner of Pivoth Corp and a strategic advisor to Acelab. He also volunteers as the vice chairperson on the board of directors of the Rain Screen Association in North America and serves on the New York City Department of Buildings Technical Committee for reviewing proposed building codes. And he's also been a voting member of the ASTM EO6 Performance of Buildings since 2010. After that, we're going to hear from Dave Lemont. He's a former CEO of Revit and the executive chairman of Acelab. And then after that, we'll hear from Vardhan Mehta, who is the co-founder and CEO of Acelab and an architect as well. All right. I think we've got a good amount of folks in the room. So Stephen, whenever you're ready, feel free to share your screen and you can go ahead and get started. And I also just want to remind participants, we have a Q&A box. So if you have any questions that come up throughout the presentation, feel free to enter them there. We should have some time towards the end to discuss those.
Great. Thank you, Bo. Also, thank you to Acelab and Vardhan and Nora and Dave for organizing this. I am really excited. It's sort of the first broad presentation that I've done on most of what I do for my job, which is helping building product manufacturers through sort of strategic entry challenges on product management side, and then also on the testing, certification, et cetera. And so, you know, this is the first in a three-part series. This one's going to be about how your product attributes affect sort of your sales and marketing strategies. Some basic concepts about the product and strategies associated with, you know, which influencers to target, et cetera. And then, you know, we're going to have some follow-up here throughout the year with two other modules going into, you know, project-based sales structures and really deep dive into the project process there and who does what, and then finally exploring the channel structures that are used around the industry for exterior products. So, like I said, this one's focused on how your product affects what your sales and marketing strategies are. And we're going to go through some of the decision making specifically based on products and the things that I go through with my clients. And then we're going to, you know, sort of finish off here with sort of putting it together and talking about alignment there. So to start out with, you know, I'm bringing you through the process that I use when I first start with a client and we're talking about a product that we're going to introduce to the market. I'm going to go through some categories, just put it in some broad context and figure out sort of who's most important for us to spend the most resources on as we put together the strategy for the sales structure and marketing structure. So, you know, for me, the first thing is when I'm thinking about a product is this product visible, right? And so I'm thinking about the finished building. Is the product visible? Is it invisible? So with, like, you know, claddings or visible accessories, architectural elements, obviously those things have some aesthetic value to them. They're going to affect where we go in terms of spending resources for time and attention. For things like membranes and hidden attachment systems, insulation, you know, those, I consider those sort of invisible products, and we're going to adjust our strategy based on that. And we'll get into exactly how we do that after we go through these, you know, these four different sort of decision points that put it into a broad category. So again, thinking about the product, I'm thinking about, you know, how commoditized is the product, and you're looking on your screen, you know, commoditized versus differentiated, sort of different ends of the spectrum. But, you know, there's all sorts of places in between. It's sort of how commoditized. And I'm assuming if you're on this webinar, you do not have a fully commoditized product, right? That's like, basic materials, basic chemicals, low risk, accessories, things like that. It more likely you're dealing with something that's manufactured, multi-component products, technical products, something that has aesthetic differentiation. So we're going to assume it's differentiated. But in that assumption, let's sort of go through and prove to you that you have a differentiated product. One of those things is we start with market perception. So, do customers see the product as perfectly interchangeable with those offered by your competitors, right? And so, if they don't, then immediately you have some amount of differentiation here. If they do, then let's talk about price, right? The next thing is is your price the only factor in driving consumer purchase decisions in that category, right? And so if they don't, then we're going to move to other differentiators and sort of figure that out. But if they do, then we can say, okay, that product is likely commoditized, right? If we have both the market perception being this perfectly interchangeable and price is the only driving factor, then you shouldn't have a job, right? This is going to go to Alibaba, and people are going to look for this product on price. Most likely, these aren't the two things that are happening for your product. You are not commoditized. You're moving to, figure out your differentiator. So, is that brand loyalty? Do consumers exhibit strong loyalty to specific brands even when prices are higher? And they might do that for a bunch of different reasons. Most often, they're doing that for comfort, right? Some amount of liability they have in decision making, they're going to go with brands that they trust. When it comes to that, right? And then the question is, how do we build trust with them? But if it's not brand loyalty, maybe it's product features and innovation. Does your product offer unique features and innovations or benefits that your competitors do not? And then finally, if it's not about your product, maybe it's about your customization or your service. Are there significant opportunities for customization that you can capitalize on there? And, again, if you're on this webinar, you're probably unique. You probably do not have a commodity product. And that's why we're talking about, sort of how to fit this in. So again, as we go into the next category of how to fit your product into your strategic decision-making for sales and marketing strategies, I'm looking at whether your product is customized per project or whether you have sort of a list sale product. And that might not mean exactly a list sale where you're putting out price lists and people are ordering off them, but essentially you have products that are sold in bulk or sold by piece, and they're not customized. So somewhere in there, your product falls. And again, one of the categories for your strategic decision making. And finally, if I'm thinking about how to place this, I'm wondering whether your differentiators are technical or service oriented. And so, something like, we might not think of as technical as like a product that has the brightest colors on the market. That's a technical differentiator. And we do something different with that than we would do with, let's say, a product that has the best project management service or something to that effect, right? And so as I think about the product, that's the last category where I'm starting to put this into the right place so that we can build our sales and marketing strategy. So we're going to put this on hold for a second. We're going to come back to this slide once we actually put a product into this space. But the next thing we're going to talk about is sort of the building out your strategy. So when I'm thinking about the options that are open to us for building a sales strategy, immediately I'm thinking about push and pull strategies. And this is really, business 101. If you took a business class in college, you probably had some amount of exposure to push and pull strategies. And so, a push model is really something where you are going out and you are putting local inventory in the market. You are convincing the actual decision makers at the transaction point that they want your product over another product when they're deciding to, let's say, install a cladding. And some of the things that might fall in here are some like, basic fasteners, like tech fasteners or something to that effect, where you're really trying to build some sort of brand relationship with the decision maker, and you're not necessarily focusing on that project specification. Now, when we go to project-based sales, that's where a pull strategy comes into place, and you're really focused on making the influencers make decisions that ultimately is going to pull your product through at the transaction level. And so, for most of what I do, we focused a good amount on that project-based sales, but you'll see in a second that we need to be looking at both parts of this. What this means for the rest of your business strategy is significant, because you have different things that happen with a typical push model than a pull model for the amount of inventory you have to consider, right? If you're just building a customized project or a customized product to a project, then you're not keeping inventory. You're really producing that for every project that comes out, and there's a good amount of manufacturers out there that do that. For a push model, you're trying to keep inventory at in local places where the transaction happens, and being the one that that has product there for the taking. It also has to do with how you interact with your customers and the channel structure that we're going to talk about in series 3 here. And then, a little bit about how much customization you can have within project decision making. So again, thinking about those, those broad strategies, the first thing I want to do is sort of lay out the way that we all think of the sales process when it comes to building products on the exterior side. And traditionally, we're looking at this pull model. We're saying the architect has a good amount of power here, so we want to get into architectural specifications. Now, what that means is, as the supplier, you have a sales team. That sales team focuses on the architect. The architect says, this is the greatest product. I want to put this in my specification. And the owner then takes that specification, transfers it to the bid documents for the general contractor, and the general contractor goes out and tells the installer, this is what's specified on the building. Then you hope that installer comes back to you and says, hey, this product was specified. Where do I get it? And that's where your transaction happens. Now, one of the things that happens here is that sort of manufacturers struggle to define their customer, because they end up having to service both sides of this, right? So I can tell you, I've been part of companies where marketing and sales say the architect is our customer, and estimators and project managers say the subcontractor is our customer. And there's actually internal debates over who's more important. But, this all centers around sort of a confusion over this strategy, right? If you look at this strategy, you say, okay, well, manufacturers do this because they know that architects have product decision-making capabilities. They have the ability to put it in the specification. That specification tells the contractors what to put in there. And then architects oversee project decisions throughout the process, right? There has to be some sort of sign-off for substitutions, et cetera. And while this is true, it's sort of partly true. Manufacturers are often surprised when they see that their product gets value engineered for a similarly priced product. And installers bid unspecified products, and then installers that aren't qualified might get this. And those all surprise us throughout this process. So what does this mean is that, we really have to be looking at this as more of a holistic strategy, right? So you might focus more on architectural sales over contractor sales, but you have to be paying attention to both. And really, the successful strategy is to create both, installer relationships and architectural relationships, so they can come together in the end, or else, you have somebody else who has those relationships on either end eating your lunch. And the benefits of this model, the benefits of paying attention to the installer to some amount is, obviously you get some protection in the value engineering discussions. You might get a price advantage because, again, just like if you're more comfortable with a product, you're going to be pushing that product, and installers have the ability to price things differently based on how much risk they feel like they have. There's a few more advantages here for your relationships with installers, but one of the most important things is to realize that the installer is not going to sell your product for you, right? You need to have those relationships with installers. If we left that out of here, some people on the call will be saying, why didn't we mention that? But even your best relationships with installers are not going to create the reach you need in order to grow a successful business. That's really up to you. So, what does that mean? If we lay out the project process, there's a lot of influencers throughout that process, right? And so I asked ChatGPT to create an influencer image for me, and it created this image. I wasn't psyched that it had cigarettes in it, so I said, hey, make the same image without cigarettes, and it added more cigarettes in it. So then I just sort of gave into it, and I said, make a cigarette influencer image, and this is what it gave me. So just had a little fun there, but we're not talking about any of these influencers when we're talking about influencers in the project here. What we do talk about is folks that have some say throughout this process because they're being talked to by someone who's, you know, ultimately in the core, core value chain here. So obviously you have a product rep in there. And when I say product rep, you're probably thinking of your own product rep, but you have to remember that it's not just your product rep out there. It's your competitors' product reps out there and, you know, other functional competitors also. And so, you know, the product reps are influencers. A lot of architects use them as a consultative service. And you have to think about whether you have the right rep there to be, you know, to be used in that way. Then you have independent specifiers, right? And these are folks that the architect might use to help them create specifications. They also have a lot of say in terms of products because, you know, their product knowledge on the technical side is pretty deep, and architects rely on them. Then you might have the installing subcontractor having some say over what they're, you know, what they're comfortable doing and having there. The general contractor is someone who typically we're not spending a whole lot of resources on in terms of you know, a focused strategy, but they do have some amount to play in this product decision-making process, right? So even though the general contractor might not say use this product or use that product, the general contractor will say, you know, what is our risk here or there? What's our, you know, compliance standpoint? Also, they might put some amount of pressure on the installing subcontractor to say, hey, where can we save some money, right? And that's where you know, you have some influence from the general contractor. Then you do have owners reps, and again, for the most part, owners reps are not going to be, you know, in those meetings saying we're going to use this product or that product. But they are going to, you know, create friction if they feel like there's some risk here in terms of using something that's unproven or something like that. Then you have, you know, I have professional engineer in here. That might be anyone, you know, from actually, you know, an engineer doing structural calculations or someone that's commissioned to do the building envelope on a job. The architect uses, you know, vendors to this capacity, and other influencers use sub vendors to this capacity. So you should really know sort of who's in that process. Your midstream distributors, again, someone that we don't typically think of as influencing this sales process, but they are often creating some amount of input throughout this process when we have questions about, you know, how long things take or how long it takes to do fabrication or whatever that is. Even sometimes sharing details of their specific way of doing things. And so, you know, they might have some influence over what gets used. And then at the end of the project, you have your AHJ inspector, who's, and that's not necessarily the end, but it's through the permitting process or as it's going up. And they have to have some amount of comfort with what's going up. And so if they haven't, you know, heard of those products or understand them intuitively, then, you know, you might have some friction there. And finally, I threw in a facade consultant. We have these on every project. The facade consultant looks suspiciously like me here. And I would say that, you know, depending on where your product lies, this facade consultant might have, you know, different impacts on what your product or how your product is thought of throughout this process. So if you're a membrane product, you know, that facade consultant might have a lot to do with sort of how expensive it is to install your membrane. If you're a component or range screen component product for attachment systems or something like that, they might have something to do with how often you are going through those membranes or some other aspect of that. But altogether, you know, the question of who's talking about your product, you know, it's everybody, right? And so, you know, now the question is, you know, what do we do about the fact that there's all these folks on a project, and I only have you know, a salesperson that has to work one day at a time, sort of focusing to find out where to go to get our product specified or get attention for our product. Now, obviously, you're not going to devote the same amount of resources for every single one of the influencers that I talked about. So it's all about targeting based on your product, right? And what you should know is that regardless of your product, there's going to be multiple decision makers. There is going to be influence at every stakeholder, and what you have to do is understand sort of where each of those influencers are coming from, and sort of what those look like at each part of the process. And that's really what module number 2 in this series is going to get into, is going through that project process and really going in depth for this sort of who does what at what stage of the project process. But as we talk about the product influencing our sales and marketing strategies, I wanted to actually give some examples of how I look at products from a initial focusing and targeting standpoint. So I took the premium large format cladding panel that everybody knows. This might be any number of materials. It might be metal, it might be HPL, porcelain, what have you, fiber cement. But it's a premium large format cladding panel. If I'm thinking about these 4 categories, obviously this is a visible part of the building. It's aesthetic. It has aesthetic and technical and service differentiation that we can draw on. So it's differentiated. It's customized because it's created specifically for each project. And then I just put down the primary differentiator of this specific one that we're talking about. And I'm just picking one out of the air, is that it's the most pre-tested. It has the most pre-tested customized solutions, right? And what that means is that the manufacturer's gone through, they've done the most technical work of their competitors, and they can offer a lot of different solutions that they know will be compliant to the architect and the contractor. So what do we do with the fact that that this product? Oh, sorry. Before we start down there, I just wanted to go through a few different other differentiators we could have gone through, right? So, this could have been industry-leading color fastness, right? We could have done one for that, and that would have looked a little different. This could have been the largest panel module available, and both of those would be sort of technical differentiators, and we would look at this a little bit different than the service differentiator of the pre-tested product. And then, you could have had a different service differentiator, like the best in-house project management and bid services, which again, we might shift our strategy just a little bit based on the fact that this is a different service. It might hit on a different influencer in the process. But what we chose is that this panel has the most pre-tested customized solutions in the market. So what do we do with that, right? So we have this large format premium cladding panel. What we want to do, because it's a visible product, because the architect and specifier care about it, is we want to work on being the basis of design in the architectural specification at schematics or design, right? That's where we want to start to focus, because that's what our product tells us we should focus on. Because we have a differentiator we want to get the specification to identify the differentiators that make our product the best for this project, right? And then we want to focus on solutions where we are best, and that might be aesthetic, it might be technical. Remember, our differentiator is that we have the most pre-tested solutions, right? And so I put that down as a service, but in some ways it could be technical. If we have the most pre-tested solutions, we're going to want to put something in front of the architect that they can choose and say, here's your flexibility, that we've made sure that no matter whether you choose this or this or this or this, that it's going to be compliant down the road. And you want to somehow get those into the details or into the specifications. And then, as you look towards the rest of your process, right? If we're spending most of our time on the architect, because this is visible, it's something the architect cares about, and the architect will more likely protect throughout the process. We still need to spend some amount of time understanding what installers might want to build relationships with us and might be interested in what we have to offer. And so, what I would look for here is installers who prefer to reduce their liability over winning every job, right? And there's installers out there who know that if they bid what's specified, then they have less liability. Also, if they know that the product has been thoroughly tested, they know that they're pairing with a manufacturer that will ultimately give them less liability when they get callbacks down the road. And one thing here is this is a big part of what I do for a living in terms of helping to create and develop channel strategies, and it's actually being out there and helping develop those channels through test markets and so on. And we tend to generalize a lot. We tend to say architects are this and contractors are this, and GCs only care about this. And I will tell you that if I am looking for a specific contractor that has specific attributes like this, I can find these in every market, right? I can also find the contractors that want to be the lowest cost. But it's important to realize that it's up to you to create sort of these definitions of what works best for you, and then fill your strategies with that. Now, if we go from the sexiest product, which is that cladding panel, to one of the least sexy products, and before anyone takes my narwhal membrane, I made up this brand. I thought it was pretty clever, and if you're going to use it, we're going to work on some licensing. But it is a WRB, right? A water-resistant barrier membrane. It's I would say a lot less sexy than exterior cladding panels, but it doesn't mean that that we have any different process we're going through here, right? So we're looking at this membrane. We're saying, is it visible? Is it invisible? What are we doing in terms of differentiating it? This is probably differentiated technically and from a service standpoint. It's sold through local distribution, and then the primary differentiator is that for this one, I just picked one out of the air, is that it's got the longest UV durability. So again, thinking about this, I'm thinking about first, I'm thinking about the architect. What do I want to do with the architect? Well, I probably want to spend less resources on trying to get into a specific project. I really want to get some mind share on the architectural side, right? And so I'm spending money more on sort of those mind share initiatives and trying to get into master specifications, and less on sort of following projects specifically. I want to make sure that my local folks have consistent focus messaging, right? So that's local distribution. I want to make sure that my contractor relationships go through brand building initiatives and personal relationships with local support. And I'm looking for contractors that that care about the fact that I have this UV performance differentiator. And one of the things for contractors is that this means that they have a lot more margin for error on the schedule when we choose something that has higher UV performance here. And this, again, could have been anything that we chose here as a differentiator. I'm just choosing this one, but this would change what we do in terms of a strategy. So as you see, targeting is essential here. And assuming that, that you have a somewhat reasonable product offering and a decent sales team, the effectiveness and efficiency of your targeting will be the strongest determining factor of your success in terms of growth, right? And what does that targeting mean? Well, for me, I know that if it's something I'm interested in, I want education support on that item, right? That's what it comes down to. We all have the same needs, and so I want to find avenues that allow my target to gain education and support on that. And that's going to increase your sales efforts, or it's going to increase the efficiency of your sales efforts. It's really going to provide more value to those targets and create some amount of relationship where they're reaching out to you. And honestly, it's going to create a happier sales team. I know of a company who has the happiest sales team that I've worked with. And one of the things that sales team said to me is that they don't do any cold calls, right? They go into warm leads every time, and the way they did that is because the company spent time, resources, on money on creating those front end tools to make sure that they weren't wasting the time of their targets, and they were able to give warm leads to their sales team. And so having that happy sales team makes a big difference. Now, again, thinking about this targeting, we have to realize, that this isn't as easy as that circle that we showed before, right? This is, you have to know your targets. You have to know sort of where they fall. There are groups within groups. From the architect side, there's the architect of record, but there might be a design architect. There might be a commission architect for parts of the building. The general contractor might have, also different categories, and the same thing on the installer side. As far as architects go, just to sort of give you an idea of the way I look at this, when I'm thinking about targeting architects, I can give you the biggest architects in the US here, but it's almost useless to you, except maybe for some broad marketing, which I tell my clients not to spend money on. I like I like stuff that gives you personal experience and sort of that targeted marketing. And so I'm not looking at this, right? I'm looking at my product and I'm saying, for my product attributes, what types of buildings that my product goes on, well, who are the architects that I should be focusing on, right? And so I'm breaking these down typically into the size of architects and also the types of business that the architects do, so that I'm not going in wasting my salespeople's time. I'm also not going in and wasting my target's time here. And this is also the way you think about sort of other other folks throughout the value chain here, right? You have to know not only sort of your broad targets, but you have to look at them as individuals, and that is, even if we're not talking about architects, we can be talking about any influencer in the chain. You have to look at this company as sort of their value, or their place in the value chain, and how they are relative to their competitors, how they feel relative to their competitors, where they place in terms of other stakeholders and who they're trying to satisfy, right? So a lot of times when I talk about giving the architect something that's useful to them, often I'm talking about giving the architect something that they can give to an owner, right? Because they're interested in making sure that their clients are happy. You also have to consider sort of company drivers like core competencies and the culture in the organization. And then finally, you have these individual motivators. And one of the things that that we can think about when we think about architects is that a lot of younger architects, even if I'm going to the biggest brands in architecture, a lot of the younger architects, have career goals of their own. They're thinking about opening up their own studio one day, or doing something like that. And so they're thinking about their personal brand on the portfolio they're working on. And that's something that you want to consider. Now, when we talk about all of this targeting effort, for the longest time, we were talking about what can we do to go out and make this happen, and knock on doors and send emails and make phone calls, etc. Now, we have a whole new way of doing this now, and the question is, sort of, how can we reverse this equation? So, just as much as we were doing all that before, we should still be doing a lot of that, but we should be thinking about how we can make our strategies more efficient and effective by incorporating some of these tools to reverse the equation. So, if we think of platforms that help architects take control of this relationship, Acelab is one of those, right? Acelab is one in that category that that really helps architects take control of this relationship and sort of come back to you. And you want to think about how you can get involved in things like that. The same thing with other digital marketing initiatives. So I work a lot with vendors that do highly targeted digital marketing for my clients. And that's another way to reverse this equation. So you're not going out necessarily knocking on doors, that they are coming towards you. It's a vital part of this whole equation now. And if you're not doing this with your business, you should be thinking about it. And then finally, I just want to close this out by looking at a few different sales structures. What we know of is employees versus third-party agents. That's sort of the typical discussion when it comes to manufacturer sales structures. And I think that that's a fairly simplistic one, but it's something that comes up often when we're talking about how do we build something from scratch. So, direct employees are solely focused on your products and your company. They can be redirected for internal initiatives. They can, focus on sort of things that are much more longer term payoff in terms of your relationships and other initiatives than you might have with an agent. And then, the employees also have opportunities for company growth that will create some amount of loyalty and broader values. Agents, they only get paid when the product's sold, so that's they're often less expensive for the manufacturer. They do fill their days with facade product sales. So I mean, if you're looking at hyper focus, this is the definition of hyper focus, because they get paid when they make facade sales. they're already plugged into networks. So again, if you have a company that's looking to move into this space, you sort of have a leg up there. And then the agent relationship is also more flexible than employee relationships when it comes to sort of changes and growth in your company. As we look at the hybrid models, this is where I think everyone thinks of the hybrid model as how do we join employees and agents, and typically that's done by saying, okay, we're going to put an employee in this region, an agent in this region, or we have employees doing this product or agents, and they don't really overlap. And that's it's typically to supplement what you're doing. I think the more interesting thing is that we're starting to see more of this hybrid model where we're seeing combined employees and agents, or combined employees and third parties. And this is where you have some amount of your employees working on the things that the manufacturer does best, and then have your third party agent doing the things that agent does best. And the most obvious way to look at this is like when you partner with one of your channel partners, and you say, okay, we have a channel partner that's capable, that has their own sales team. What we want to do is have an employee and that channel partner sales team working together, so that we can attack that project from both sides, and each of us can sort of chime in when we have our core competency hit on. And that works when you have, like, let's say a fabricator or something that that is looking to develop some specific solutions for a project. You as a manufacturer probably don't want to take on liability of doing that, even though you provide a lot of consultation. And if you had a partner there that can say, not only this is a possibility, but this is what we can actually do, then you could figure out how to have your sales team work with your channel partner sales team and actually create a more effective, sort of higher service solution that architects will probably go towards. So this sort of concludes our first series of of these three modules, and this was all about how we look at the sales strategy and how your product affects what that sales strategy is. As we go to the next series, we're going to look at a deeper dive into that project process and what each of the stakeholders is doing at each part of that project process. And then finally, the third one will be going deep dive into the channel structures that you're probably using and the channel structures of your competitors. All right.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Hey, Bo, if you don't mind, I want to go off the script a little bit and maybe ask Stephen a question in response to that. So, Stephen, with the external market conditions right now and what everyone's anticipating, let's say for the remainder of the year, can you maybe like talk to your thoughts around what that means in terms of the timing for manufacturers to either launch new products that might already be on the roadmap, or more proactively utilize some of your strategies, to increase or to achieve that growth, specifically, let's say with some of these influences like you talked about with architects and so on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So as what we've been seeing, and I haven't been seeing specifically a reduction in opportunities. What I've been seeing is a lot of slowdown in project timelines, right? And so if we're looking at slowdown in project timelines, and we're looking at existing projects and or products and sort of those growth strategies, I'm thinking about how I can shift my focus from if I'm talking about one influence versus the other to parts of the process that have shorter lead times. And so for me, that's often how do we get sort of further into the contractor side of this, or devote a little more resources to the contractor side of this, and build those relationships, or maybe reinforce those relationships, so we get maybe more things falling in our direction than our competitors. So that's what I'm thinking about at times like where you have that slowdown and you're trying to increase or decrease lead times. But also, you have this as things start to slow down, you have this time where you say, okay, how can we gain a little more mind share for when it starts to come back?
Great.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks, Stephen.
any other
Vardhan,
questions?
you want to share your screen for me?
Yeah, I'll share my screen and then Dave's up next. For any other folks that may have questions, feel free to throw those in chat as well. We're gonna do QA in about like 15 minutes or so, and we can answer those live. We'll also be happy to follow up afterwards. So I'm gonna share my screen and then Dave's up next.
Great. Thanks, Vardhan.
Oops.
Yeah,
You guys
so
see my screen okay?
let's just go
Yeah.
right to the. I'm going to talk mostly about architects today. I think you've heard my background is I'm the chairman of Acelab today. I was the CEO of Revit many years ago, ran that company for its entirety, and then the company was merged into Autodesk, and I spent a year at Autodesk. So I did learn quite a bit about the architect's mindset and how to sell to architects and some of the things that are very important to them. And I hope to share, some of that with you today. So with that, let's. One of the biggest lessons I learned at Revit was that there's a fundamental macroeconomic business difference between the businesses that all of you run on the call today and the business that an architect runs. And, as a manufacturing business, you invest in your technology, you invest in R&D. You're going to make an investment to ship, hundreds, 1,000 units of products. You're going to have better processes. You need to take a longer term view into your products. An architect is a service business. Everything is project based. The architect is paid generally by the hour. And that often means that if they're not efficient, they're going to be even paid for their inefficiency. And there's often a lower investment in technology and research and in processes. And I think it's important for anyone marketing or selling to a service business, particularly architects, to understand that, they just look at the world a little bit differently and from a practical standpoint based upon the way the economies work in their business. I hate to generalize, but I will anyway. I think architects are generally overworked, and the majority of the people in those firms are underpaid. They are in a tremendous rush. They're very deadline oriented, and when they need something, they want it tomorrow. But when you do get back to them and the fire drill is over, you may not hear from them for quite a while. And architects are also generally risk adverse, in that they like to go with what they know can work in the past. And they can be wary of things that they're not sure are going to be good solutions or haven't been validated in the market. They definitely do not like to be sold to, but they do like consultation, and they value expertise, people that know what they're talking about that can advise them. I think the challenge is, if we go to the next slide, is that, from your standpoint, architects do make over 70% of the decisions in a project. That's really what the research tells us. Contractors make, an important amount and often can be involved in value engineering, but they need to go back to the architect in most cases to get their buy-in on a change. So although it's a longer term play, the architect can build your pipeline for you for the future. And if you haven't invested in that, you may find out why a future year is not as strong as a current year, because you did not plant those seeds as becoming the basis of designing enough projects the year before. The challenge with the architect is that they go with what they know. That risk adverse issue I talked about, and often they go with what they know because they are short of time. They may not know about an innovative product that you've come up with. They don't remember the lunch and learn that you had with them, perhaps. And the problem you have is if you're not what they know, then they may go with your competitor or a tried and true solution. And so the challenge really is, I think, to find ways to get in front of architects at the right time in the process. So if you go to the next slide, Vardhan, and the problem with the traditional method of lunch and learns is that you can spend a tremendous amount of money getting in front of architects that may not be at the right time. We have some manufacturing companies we deal with right now that are spending upwards of $500,000 on lunch and learns. And you can see here, we sort of broke down the costs. And there's no guarantee, although it's a good thing to do, it's great to build awareness. However, it would be greater to build awareness with architects that had an actual project at the time you show up. And it's very hard to match this activity with a real project all the time. And then lastly, the whole issue, I think, for everyone in this room is, how do you become the basis of design? How do you become a standard for the architect? Increasing brand awareness and your product differentiation at the right time when architects are in schematic and design development. Because you want to collaborate with them, you want to be their advisor. And ultimately, you want to become a standard. You want to be in their library of standards so that when the next project comes up, you become the first choice on a project like that. And I'm going to turn it over to Vardhan now to talk about Acelab, but that's really why I've joined Acelab, because I felt that I was really at the forefront of revolutionizing, not myself, but what the engineers built at Revit in terms of the way products are designed. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity to help architects make decisions about materials with a high level of efficiency that can help all of our manufacturer partners in a profound way and help architects, have better project outcomes. So,
Awesome.
Vardhan, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Great. Maybe I'll start with an introduction first. I'm Vardhan. I'm the co-founder of Acelab. I'm a second-gen architect, so I grew up in India. My dad's an architect, uncle's an engineer. Saw the practice and was obsessed with this profession and industry from a very early age. Came to architecture school in New York, pulled a lot of all-nighters as you do in architecture school. That helped me land a job at a top 10 architecture firm in the city. There, designed projects for the State Department, which were US embassies around the world, and institutional buildings for MIT and Yale. For better or worse, almost entire time and practice, I was tasked with doing stuff that I didn't go to architecture school for. So that was material research and product selection and speaking with manufacturers and so on. And I realized this is a very big reality of the practice, which 2 out of 3 graduating architects right now, architects from the next generation, don't really want to deal with. They don't want to handle the technical end of the practice. Everybody wants to be on the design side. Before I get started, I just also wanted to riff off of what Stephen mentioned. And I think this is a tremendous time for manufacturers to be launching new product segments in the market, or more proactively, more innovatively, trying to increase adoption for those segments. I think the reason for that is first from users on the platform. And now at this point, there's about 12,000 architecture firms that use Acelab. We're hearing all the time a need for value engineering, substitutions, finding alternatives, and so on for obvious reasons. Number 2 is that there's already a lot of rumblings, and it's starting to become very tangible layoffs happening in the industry, where a lot of the folks, a lot of architecture firms, big and small, are reorganizing already. I think everyone's expecting this to keep going on for the remainder of the year. But a lot of younger generation of architects that have been only in the design seat, maybe, or only in the technical seat, now have to learn and adapt and have to be able to do both. And then lastly, third, I think everybody, regardless of if you're on the technical side or the service side, I think everybody understands that there's a genuine lack of trusted experts in our industry. And with architects, that really translates to spec writers. It's a dying breed. And there's a lot of folks who are retiring, which again makes this opportunity for valued expertise or adding value on a project so much more important. So I'm going to now share my screen and quickly go through some of the things that we found with Acelab and what led to the founding of Acelab in the first place. These are some of the things I experienced myself, my friends have as well, and then now at this point, feedback that we've gathered from over 600 architects using the platform. So a lot of the times when architects are recycling a specification, repeating a decision, as they've mentioned, it's not necessarily because they know that this is the right thing to do, but it's a lack of time, expertise, knowledge, resources, bandwidth, or all of the above. And the way that translates down to is there's hundreds of thousands of products and tens of thousands of manufacturers to keep track of. This is a very like live, rapidly evolving space. No architect claims to be, an expert in all of them. A lot of the times, the tools that we all use, all the onus is on the architect to have to maintain them, to have to manage these specification platforms or something else. And if you don't do that, if you don't add in effort to that, also with same thing on the product library in the firm, then things just go haywire immediately. And then that leads to all of the information being scattered over, hundreds of spreadsheets and email threads and notes. And to avoid all of that, the architects will just sort of repeat the spec, like draw something, detail something, render something we already know, already have experience with. I mean, like which architect wants to, add a new manufacturer in the conversation when first, maybe they don't have an understanding about that manufacturer themselves. Second, may not have a reliable or responsive rep that they know from that manufacturer. Third, may get vetoed out by the contractor or the owner on the project if the architect does not have a very good understanding of that manufacturer. But the reason why we founded Acelab is, again, as they mentioned earlier, 3 out of 4 times a product is being chosen, the architect had a massive influence on that. And we see this as a huge opportunity as a team of architects for helping other architects in the US be able to optimize the product selection based on factors such as the aesthetics, performance, sustainability, technical requirements, cost, availability, which can really help the architect meaningfully wield their influence on the project and like shape the right outcome on the project. So with that, we created a product decision-making platform. The first reaction from our entire team and from the other users was that there's no need for another tool that just helps you document a decision after it's been already made. There's all of these like the tasks that happen upstream, the research that happens, having to speak with reps, being able to get that support on demand from trusted advisors, being able to find substitutes, value engineering, and so on. This is what we felt like there was a huge gap in the industry for. And so we designed a platform that could be incredibly valuable to the architect as the complete materials hub, from all the way from initial search all the way to specification and documentation. So one big reason why Acelab has been rapidly adopted by architecture firms is we made the platform free. And at the same time, we added data into Acelab for every single manufacturer that's available in the US. Because we realized like first, architects want to be able to see all the options. They don't want to go to a website or a platform that only lets the manufacturers that pay to play with that specific tool. But for architects, they want to feel that the tool is unbiased. And the second thing was architects don't need more information. There's already hundreds and thousands of manufacturer websites where they can find information. There's other platforms they can find the same information. We realized that architects want answers. And so we do this thing where there's a tech end of the company, which is really used through our platform, through this material selection platform, to source and generate demand. And then we have other ways on the other side of the technology, which helps manufacturer to accelerate their adoption with architects. Here's our team. We're all from the industry. So, there's folks like Arman and Andre who are registered architects, and they're experts on the team who are advising the other architectural users on the platform. There's other folks like Aaron Pine, who's a specification advisor and an expert spec writer in the US. And then, of course, Dave and I, Bo, and so on. But what we're truly focused on is how do we drive these high quality relationships at the right time in the project between the right architects and the right manufacturers. And we realized that these are the 4 things that the pieces of information that both sides need for this to feel like a good fit from the beginning. And so with the search on the platform, we're able to capture all the details of the architect. We also get information about that project. We also understand what is the product that from a specific manufacturer or generally they're interested in, and for what application. And then finally, what is the type of support that they require from Acelab's team of experts, which I'm going to go into in a minute, or from the manufacturer's rep themselves. And then this forms the connection through the platform where the architect is making the first move, as opposed to all the owners being on the manufacturer's marketing or sales team to have to reach out to architects who may not be the right architects, may not be the right time in the project, or it may not be the right projects at the time. So, we talked about education. We see that as a big gap in the industry right now. I think for us as an architect, I can speak to the fact that we often had like great manufacturers and reps in the office, but oftentimes when they came in for lunch and learns, we probably didn't have a need for them right away. And when the time came to specify something like that, 6, 8, 12 months later, they weren't top of mind due to all of these responsibilities that architects have to juggle on a daily basis. And so we realized that architects want on-demand education, but in a way that also helps them to build relationships, build trust with reps who can really be like a trusted resource for them, or for them to be able to educate themselves about new applications or products at the right time in the project. So we started offering these virtual webinars to also help manufacturers scale the impact of that education in real time, as opposed to it being one manufacturer, or, with one architecture firm at a time. In this case, as you can see, it grants manufacturers the opportunity to meet it really high up in the funnel, about 200 or so architecture firms every time we're organizing an event for them. And for those architects from our user base, from the 12,000 or so firms, this is an opportunity to get educated on a topic that's very important in the moment. But at the same time, we realize that our industry still heavily relies on interpersonal relationships. And I think the challenge is for any architecture firm, unless you've worked with a rep for a decade, to build new relationships, no architect wants to have hundreds of such reps on speed dial. And on the other side, for manufacturers, it's really hard to scale that approach of account-based relationships beyond a certain threshold. And so what we started doing is now at this point, just like manufacturers do, we have this team of architectural experts that are advising other architects on everything that goes in the envelope of the building. And what we realized is that while architects don't want to do research every single time by themselves on a project, they'll be very, very happy to be able to get Acelab to act as an extension of their team and add that value by offering white glove product advisory. And that's what we found to be really effective to advise the architect in an unbiased way and drive these relationships where there's a very strong fit right at that moment. And then finally, I think the most exciting tool from the architect standpoint has really been the firm library. So the firm library is a living record of every decision the architecture firm has ever made in the past, plus an opportunity for them to utilize Acelab's very broad database and be able to capture that information, reuse that information, recycle it, find alternatives, find substitutes directly from the platform in one place. And unlike a product library in an architect's office, Acelab actually does all of the work in managing that information. All the reps that we have a partnership with are readily available. All the regional reps from the manufacturers are readily available in the firm library. And anytime an architect is adding a product or a manufacturer into a library, that information is being shared with the manufacturer so that they can take the next step and reach out and provide the support to the architect based on what's the most important at that moment. So I'll pause here. I mean, as a way to conclude, I think the most important thing we have realized for architects right now is really being able to get that support right at the time they need it. And I think on the manufacturer time, it's obviously being able to find and discover the right architects at the right time in the project and for the right projects.
Right, awesome. Well, it looks like that just about brought us to time. So before folks jump off, I just want to let everyone know there's going to be a quick survey when you leave the webinar. If you'd like to sign up for a personalized demo with Acelab to learn some more, you can indicate interest on that survey and someone from our team will reach out to you to schedule a time. And you can also let us know any other questions that you might have, any feedback or comments, and anyone who has questions that we didn't get to today, we'll follow up with you after today's event. All right. Well, thank you, Stephen, Vardhan, and Dave so much. That was really informative and awesome. And thank you so much to everyone in the audience for coming out today. All right. Bye, everyone.